KO. Ooh! Greetings friends, it's Mainland here. Welcome to Let's Make a 2D Arcade Fighter Part 12. In this video I'm going to show you how to add in an X gauge or a super gauge, which allow you to basically make your moves stronger and maybe do your ultimate attack and those sorts of things. Alrighty, so the first thing we're going to do is go into our pink box or our game logic. We're going to put down a little microchip and we can call this X gauge logic. Alrighty. So now inside of this little microchip we're going to put down two variables. The first one we're going to name P1X, which is player 1's X gauge. The minimum value is going to be 0. The max will be 30. I make it 30 because it's kind of like 0 and 30. You generally have like 3 X gauge bars or maybe 4, but you can really do whatever you want. You can make it 100, you can make it anything. Alrighty, then I'm going to copy this one and it's just going to be P2X. And it'll have the same min and max values. Okay, sweet. So now we're going to make the actual design of the super gauge itself, and for that we're going to go to movers and outputs and then get ourselves a little text displayer. We're going to go into it and press space or triangle so that we've just got an empty one. Then we're going to go text box properties, turn off autofit. Then we'll have our nice little box over here. We're going to go into its alignment and make it left and bottom. Then we're going to adjust the size of it accordingly. Generally they tend to be quite bar-like, you know, little thin, but you can of course change this around as you see fit. Alrighty, we can turn off stuff like shadow, I reckon. Whoops, we can turn off stuff like shadow. Then I'm going to copy this dude, make an all black version, go Kiwis, and then I'm going to make it so that the sort order is 0. So when I look at them both, this one is going to be behind it. So 0 just means it's sort of like lower in terms of the sorting. Think of it as sending to the back. Alrighty, then I'm going to go into this dude and actually make it blue, I think. Go into text box properties, go to the second one, you know. And I'm going to make it blue. I think that's a nice X gauge color, but you can make it yellow or whatever. Then I'm going to copy this dude. I'm going to make its text box not actually visible. Then I'm going to go into the text properties and I'm going to press L2 and triangle so that I can get these nice little lines over here. These nice lines, so that now I've got kind of like I've separated these sections of the box of our little super gauge. Might do another space there and see how that goes. Okay, sweet. So now if we put it here, we see we've got a nice little super gauge and it's separated into 3 parts. So this one is the background, this one is the sort of color of it, and this one is the little separators. Okay, sweet. Now what we're going to do is get ourselves a little keyframe. I'm just going to cancel it for now. Okay, sweet. Now we're going to go into our middle one, which is the one that shows the color of our text gauge, or our X gauge, sorry. We're going to make it go all the way to the bottom, as small as we can make it, and we're going to make it show text box is going to be invisible. So now that's what it is by default. This keyframe, on the other hand, is going to make it visible again, and it's going to move it along. So I'll just click on our background, and it's going to move it along so that it fills up the gauge nicely like that. We want to try and get it perfect. Alrighty, there you go. Okay, sweet. So now as our player 1 X gauge fills up, it's going to increase the size of the fill of the X gauge, of the color, you know what I mean? So the way that we're going to get that logic to work is we're going to go into logic and processing. Then we're going to go to the signal manipulator, connect it here, and connect the input to the actual current value of player 1x. Then we're going to go into custom remapper, set the in on the left side, set the in to 30. So you can just bring this up, and you may need to use the D-pad to get the exact value. Alrighty, so now we've got 30. Okay, sweet. So now, to test if this works, we're going to put down our variable modifier. This is just a test one. Player 1x, add whatever random amount continuously, and now
You disgraced my
village.
village.
If we want to see it a little bit slower, we can reduce that. I think we'll also just quickly maybe turn off the old intro logic for a second. We can see it fills up there nicely. However, we can't really see our little separation bars very well, so I'm just going to change these so that they are in fact white, because I think that'll maybe show up a bit nicer. Now we can see that a bit more clearly, but of course you can mess with that as you desire, friends. Okay, sweet. So now that is filling up and that's working. However, I just want to see that our numbers are actually going to be working nicely with where those bars actually are. So let me just turn this dude off. So 10 looks like it's actually a little bit past that first line. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to remove a space. And you pretty much just test. Okay, that looks pretty cool. So 10 is just past the line, so that means like you'll have your first in your X gauge and you'll be able to use your your little super kind of a thing, you know what I mean? Now let's see where 20 is along that line. Okay, and 20 is around there. So friends, whatever the value is, just make sure that I made it 30 because there's just nice, 3 nice blocks. But if you make it 100, then just make sure that when it reaches that particular value, that it does actually line up nicely with your particular wherever your super gauge is. Does that make sense? So like where the first line is and where the second line is, that it actually lines up. Because now that I've got that and they line up quite nicely, we'll get rid of this old variable modifier. Now that they line up nicely, what that means is that I can actually add in a little bit of calculator logic, so that if I have a move, for example, and I'm going to do that in a future video, like an ultimate attack, and it needs you to have at least 20 of player 1x, or 30, having like your max value, then what you'll do is you'll go variable modifier, and you'll go player 1x, get value, you'll put down a little calculator, you'll go plug it into the A input, then you'll say greater than, and you won't say 10, but you'll say 9.99 or something like that. And then if it's greater than 10, then we can output something like a wireless transmitter, and this can say, for example, player 1 x 1. So now we've got this this little signal transmitter, and it's saying like, okay, player 1 now has 1 on their X gauge. They have 1x, you know what I mean? And then you could make it so that an ability, which we're going to do in a future video, such as your super attack, if your player 1 x is equal to, whatever value you need, then it's going to be like, if you've got 10, then it'll do like a super attack. And if you've got 20, in other words, 2 bars filled, you'll be able to do like a hyper attack. And then if you've got 3, you can do an ultimate attack, or however you want to sort of scale it. But this is essentially how you would do it, friends. Alrighty, that's fabulous. Okay, sweet. Now the next thing is, how are we actually going to fill this X gauge? So if you're making a game like Dragon Ball Z, like a lot of DBZ games have had like an actual button press, like an actual move and animation that like, they charge up their key or whatever. And you can totally do that. All you would have to do for that is just like any other ability, you'd kind of just get yourself a keyframe, and in that keyframe, as long as it's pressed, you would have a variable modifier, like one of these, set to add, and you would kind of just, the longer that you hold it, or as it's held, it's going to increase your energy like that. But another way you might do it is to go and get yourself a nice little variable modifier. And we're going to call it player1x add. We'll add something like 2 whenever you lose health. So when you lose health, you are going to increase your X gauge. But the person who deals damage to you is also going to get a little bit of X. But it depends how you want to sort of work your X gauge. If you want it to be that your X gauge is kind of like a last chance kind of a thing, so that like as you're damaged you get more X gauge, or if you want it to be like a snowballing mechanic where the more damage you do the higher your X gauge is, you know what I mean, then you've got to mess with that. But the way that I like to do it is when you take damage you get 2, and when you deal damage you get 1. So the way that we're going to do this is, when player 1 takes damage, they're going to get, they're going to lose 2, they're going to gain 2, and player 2's X gauge, so we'll go to player 2's X gauge, is going to increase by 1. So it's like as I'm dealt damage by player 2, player 2 will increase their gauge, but I will also increase mine by an even greater amount. Okay, sweet. So we can actually make it so that if we want to differentiate between player 1 and player 2, what we'll do is we'll pop in a nice little node here. And this node will connect to these boys. And it'll connect to currently losing health. Okay, sweet. Then we can grab another node. And for both of these, we can actually go into them and so create port, no port, so that we don't have one sticking out over here. And then we can have it so that these dudes are next to each other there. We can then copy these and do it like this. Connecty, connecty. Then connect it over here as well. So now we have 2 of the same. I'm just going to change it so that it's player 2x. So I'm currently just optimizing for 2-player mode at the minute. So now if I'm player 1, I'm going to, and I'm hurt, I'll gain X gauge, and player 2 will gain a little bit of X gauge. If I'm player 2 and I'm hurt, then I'm going to get a lot of X gauge, and player 1's going to get a little bit of X gauge. And the way that we're going to work this is going to be turned off. And if we are player 2, it's going to be turning this one off and turning this one on. Fabulous. Okay, sweet. Let's give this a bit of a test run. Alrighty. So now I'm going to play as player 2 and deal some damage to this pleb. And as you can see, their X gauge is actually increasing.
KO.
But now one of the downsides is that I've just lost my I have just lost all my X gauge in the second round, and we actually want our X gauge to remain even when we go down. So what we're going to do, or even when the round ends, I'm sorry, what you're going to do is you're going to go into P1X and P2X, and you're going to say restore value on rewind. It's currently highlighted. You're going to unhighlight it, or just click on it. So now when we go from one round to the next, it's actually going to keep our X gauge. So if you get your ass kicked in the first round, you can maybe come back in the second. So I'm just getting
KO.
And now I start the round with 2 in my X gauge. Woohoo! Similarly now, if I do some damage to this guy, I'm going to not get any X gauge because of course I'm using my old version of player 2, the poor player. Okay. RIP. We'll see that if I deal damage to him, I also get a spot of X gauge, but not as much as if I'm taking damage. Of course, this is a mechanic that you have to work out for your own game because, you know, whatever works for you,
KO.
that's going to be doing the things. And now I start with almost a full X gauge and I go whooshwa, and now I can, you know, throw off my ultimate attack or whatever it'll be, you know what I mean? Okay, sweet. And that's going to be, as I say, in the next old video. So now I think the last thing to do is to just do the same for player 2, and it's the easiest thing. You literally just copy it, or you select everything, L1 and R2, copy, connect the signal manipulator, select all of these boys, then we're going to go alignment on the horizontal plane. That's going to be on the right, and bada bing bada boom, it's right there. Okay, now here we have our various bits. It still works, of course. Player 2X, signal manipulator, keyframe, all of these dudes. And you can of course make the various calculators as you need to check when the value is full. Alrighty. And now I've got our 2 X gauges. If I do damage, cha-chang, 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 cha-chang. So they're both working. You can see player 2's gauge is filling up faster than mine because he's taking damage. Similarly, the same is happening for the other side. These poor puppets, I really do put them through the most. And then in a future video, I'm going to show you how to use this to
KO.
make your super and ultimate attacks. But here we have the logic, and it's all working, and it's all looking quite lovely indeed. So there you are, friends. This is how you add in an X gauge. This is really all you need. You just need your variable, your signal manipulator, and your keyframe, which affects the fill. You know what I mean? The little bar that fills up as your X gauge increases. And yes, friends, this is kind of like a foundational thing for super attacks, and you will be able to do all sorts of stuff with this in future. Remember to get rid of your old dude and replace him with a new one so that it's all up to date and it's all working nicely. Alrighty friends, thank you for joining me for this one. In the next video we're going to be doing ultimate attacks and maybe hyper attacks as well. And by hyper I just mean like an upgraded super attack. So it's kind of like you'll do your normal fireball and then a hyper one will maybe use one of your X gauge and then it'll become like, it'll deal more damage, or it'll become larger, or it'll travel faster, those sorts of things. And then the ultimate attack will be, if not the next video, then the following one, and that will be kind of like you do a little cutscene when you actually use your super attack ability. But yes, friends, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please let me know. If you found it useful, please hit that subscribe button. Please drop me a like so that I know that this is working for you. Alrighty. Catch you on the flip-flop, friends. Peace out.